The rivers run red on this episode of Battle Guides featuring Xenitia. Xenitia is a powerful brawler who has amazing stats and powerful effects. However, she pays for this by having a risky unique ability, needing proper life management, as well as having very awkward effects. Xenitia's unique ability is Life Tap, and although it doesn't draw you cards, during the anti-phase you can spend up to 5 life and have the value of draw on your cards be equal to the amount of life you spent. Then, after all end of beat effects activate, as long as you are not stunned, you regain all the life you spent during the anti-phase. If your draw is 0, you also gain, on damage, regain 1 life. As a note, remember that Xenitia can still be stunned even if she goes first. This means that if you don't have enough stun guard to brunt through your opponent's attack after they've brunt through your attack with their stun guard, you won't be regaining that life. So be very careful about that. This unique ability is amazing in a very deceptive way. Now you see, when you draw, it actually changes the draw values on your styles. Therefore, all of your unique abilities' power actually comes from the strength of the effects on your styles. However, the effects on your styles are often very awkward and very hard to hit, oftentimes relying on you making hard reads like knowing how much power or priority your opponent's attack pair will have. This is not reliable at all, and therefore this unique ability is not as powerful as it may initially seem. Because if you draw and end up messing up the entire beat, you will not only take the damage your opponent deals to you, you will also lose all of the life you ended up drawing in the first place, making you lose around 10 life in the process if everything goes horribly wrong when you decide to draw 5. This can be a very big problem, especially against characters who have a lot of stats or characters who can stun you through your stun guard. However, what makes this unique ability truly powerful is the last clause, stating that if your draw is 0, you regain 1 life on damage. Now this might not seem like much, but regaining 1 life over the course of the game is very strong if you do it like 5 times over the course of the game. That's effectively as if you had a 25 life pool. And that's really, really good. If you think about it in another way, regaining life is kind of like having soak without the stun guard, if you get what I mean. Given that Xenitia has absurd amounts of stun guards on her stats, it rarely matters that extra soak 1. So imagine having soak 1 on almost every attack pair. That's quite powerful on a character who has a lot of good trading styles. Therefore, Xenitia initially just trades positively against almost anyone, not only because her styles have good stats, but also because her unique ability heals her for 1 every turn. Now, of course, there are multiple ways to use this unique ability outside of just having it heal you 1 every turn, but I think this is one of the most effective ways to use it, because a lot of early and new Xenitia players make the big mistake of drawing every turn. In fact, you should rarely draw during a game, and you should only really draw when your style is quite powerful if you do so. Now, without much else to say, let's move on to those styles, shall we? Let's start off with Draining. Draining has range plus 0 to 2 and stun guard 2, and it also has on damage at range X. Your opponent loses 1 life and you regain 2 life. Just note that X is equal to your draw. This means that you have to draw life equal to the range your opponent will be at when you deal damage to them for this to work. Again, that's very awkward and very hard to hit. But if you ignore the on damage effect, it's still a good style. Having stun guard 2 and range plus 0 to 2 is really insane for no penalties to power and priority. It's really, really good. Use this to hit confirm against enemies, and sometimes, maybe, you'll be able to get that on damage effect to work. Otherwise, you can just regain 1 life using your unique ability, and that alone makes this style well worth it. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend this thing with Strike. Strike synergizes with the extra range and the extra stun guard. That's pretty much it. It deals a lot of damage, regains 1 life as well if you choose to not draw. However, if you don't want to pair it with Strike, you can also easily pair it with Grasp. Grasp benefits a lot from the extra range, but it also benefits a lot because it allows you to move the opponent into the correct range to make the on-damage effect work. That's pretty much it. It can be quite powerful if you do it that way. As we talked about earlier, even if you're faster, you can still get stunned. So when using Grasp with this style, be very careful of opponents who have a lot of stun guard. Next up is Guilty. Guilty has range +0, power +1, priority -2, and stun guard 2. And before activating, move 1 space. This is actually quite powerful, allowing you to basically get range +0 to 1 on a style that not only has +1 power, but also stun guard 2, making it so that you can be very tanky and hit hard. However, the passive effect over there says that when you're hit and the damage you would take is equal to your draw, you take no damage instead. This effect is actually quite interesting because it's not like the other effect we talked about earlier where you have to make a hard read. Instead, think of this effect as stun guard 1. Say that your attack only has stun guard 2, much like this, and you're expecting your opponent to hit you with a 3 power attack. If you draw 3, what will happen is that they will hit you for 3, but since it's 3 and you drew 3, you take 0 damage instead. However, if they deal 2 or less damage to you, you don't get stunned and you can still hit them and regain the life you drew. This is the power of Guilty, allowing you to essentially gain extra stun guard 1 on your opponent who might have more power than you think. Just be very careful of opponents who can deal more than 5 damage. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend this thing with Shot. Shot synergizes very well with the built-in stun guard and the before activating movement effect. Plus, if you really want to take the risk, you can draw 5 and have this effectively have stun guard 5 instead of stun guard 4. It's quite powerful and can deal a lot of damage to boot. However, if that's not your thing, you can also pair Guilty with Strike. If your opponent's burst is down, Guilty Strike is quite powerful, dealing 5 damage and has stun guard 7, making it really hard for them to stun you. And of course, if you choose to not draw anything when you're playing this attack pair, you can also regain 1 life, effectively making a difference in HP of 6. It's quite powerful and quite effective so long as your opponent's burst is down. Next up is Razor. Razor has power +1 and priority +1. It also has stun guard X and a very interesting start of beat effect. If your draw is 1 or greater and the nearest opponent's stun guard value is equal to your draw, you ignore stun guard with this attack. This is very powerful because if your opponent is playing a strike and you decide to draw 5, you can effectively cancel out their strike stun guard, stun them, and then they'll really feel sad. This is a very powerful effect. However, it's also very awkward and clumsy. It's very hard to guess your opponent's stun guard because they have 2 attacks that have varying amounts of stun guard. However, more than that, your opponent also has access to the force gauge, meaning that somebody who uses a strike can easily just decide to get stun guard 2 using the force gauge in order to make it so that you can't get their amount of stun guard because you can only draw up to 5 life. So although this is very problematic, remember that Xenitia styles are never about the stupid awkward effects. They're usually about the very powerful stats and great stun guard. Razor is that. It has good stats, it has decent stun guard if you draw properly. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this thing with Shot. Shot synergizes very well with the extra stun guard, and it also gives Razor the hit confirm it so desperately needs. However, if you don't want to pair it with Shot, you can also easily pair it with Drive. If you don't want to draw this turn, you can also easily pair Razor with Drive, allowing you to take advantage of the extra prio and extra power while also gaining back health. And of course, if you feel that your opponent suddenly gained more priority than you, just draw a lot more health and suddenly have stun guard 4. Next up is Verging. Verging has power +1 and priority +1, and a before activating effect that says move X spaces, where X is your draw. Now this is a very interesting style again because it has great stats. I mean, not as good as Razor because Razor has stun guard, but this is very powerful because it has movement. However, the movement again is very awkward because you have to move exactly the amount of spaces that equal your draw. So if you draw 3, you have to move exactly 3 spaces. You can't move less. This is quite problematic if your opponent has variable movement options. You can easily overshoot the opponent and end up missing your attack. But aside from that, this is quite a powerful attack because it allows you to move great distances so long as you're faster than your opponent. So be very wary of people who can be faster than you, as they might stun you out of your attack and again make you lose life. Seeing as Verging is one of the few styles Xenitia has that has literally no stun guard on it. With that being said, it pairs very well with Drive. If you're at the opposite end of the board, this and Drive synergize together to not only give you a fast attack that deals 4 damage, it also covers a big distance, allowing Xenitia to close the gap against many rangers. However, if that's not your thing, you can also easily pair it with her unique base, Blood Weapon. Blood Weapon is an interesting pair with Verging because you use it when you're in melee range. Given the fact that Blood Weapon gets plus minimum and maximum range equal to the amount of draw you have, and then Verging allows you to move spaces equal to the amount of draw you have, it essentially means that you will move back from the opponent and then still hit them because you gain range equal to the draw you have. So say that you draw 1, you move back 1 space, and now your Blood Weapon has range 1 to 2. This means that you still hit your opponent. So if you're in melee range once more, and you decide to draw 2, you move back 2 spaces, being at range 3 from the opponent now, and then your Blood Weapon now has range 2 to 3. Meaning that this is a very powerful attack pair for dodging opponents, getting far away from them, and then still hitting them with a lot of damage and regaining life on top. It's very powerful and very effective, especially against opponents who aren't fast enough to deal with it. Next up is Rending. Rending has Prio -3 and Stun Guard 3, but it also has a very interesting start of beat effect. If your draw is 1 or more, opponents whose priorities equal your draw can't hit you. This is a very powerful effect, but on a very bad style. Seeing as Xenitia usually praises herself for having a lot of good powered styles, Rending isn't really the best one, seeing as it's only slow and has Stun Guard 3. Stun Guard 3, although is magical Stun Guard, pales in comparison to literally every single one of her other styles. However, it makes up for it by being a very good read style. If you're able to effectively know your opponent's specific attack pair, you can guess their priority and make them miss, no matter what they decide to do, making Rending very powerful for opponents who have very small priority spreads, seeing as maybe all of their styles are Prio +0 or Prio +1. This is very good if your opponent decides to not anti for extra priority using the force gauge. This can be very problematic as well, but if you get the read right, you usually win the beat and deal 3 damage for free, although that's not really that good. When it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this thing with Shot. Shot synergizes with the Stun Guard and gives it the extra hit confirm. And if you don't want to pair it with Shot, you can also easily pair it with Drive. Drive pretty much does the same exact thing, giving you the hit confirm you so desperately need, and it has some decent defenses to boot. And finally, we have Xenitia's unique base, Blood Weapon. Blood Weapon is range 0 to 1, power 3, priority 4. It has a passive effect and a very excellent on-hit effect. On hit, you regain 1 life, which is pretty much like her unique ability. However, passively, this attack also gains +1 maximum and minimum range equal to the amount of draw you have. Effectively, if you draw 1, it has range +1. If you draw 2, it has range +2. So drawing 1 makes it range 1 to 2, drawing 2 makes it range 2 to 3, drawing 3 makes it range 3 to 4. This attack is quite powerful because it effectively means that Blood Weapon works on any range. It's a melee attack, it's a range attack, it's a mid-range attack, it's a long-range attack, it's everything. However, it can only be one of them at a time, meaning that if your opponent has a lot of movement, Blood Weapon has a big chance to miss. However, aside from that, Blood Weapon is quite powerful nonetheless, meaning that you can easily pair it with a lot of Xenitia's attacks, given that not all of them have decent amounts of hit confirm. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing it with Razor and Verging. Both of these effectively give it a lot of good stats, turning it into a 4 power attack at 5 priority. However, both of these also synergize very well when you draw. When you use Verging, you get to move, and when you use Razor, you get Stun Guard. Either way, they both synergize with the amount of draw you'll be using in order to use Blood Weapon effectively. Because you rarely need to use Blood Weapon in melee range, it's oftentimes a mid to long range tool, so keep that in mind. Xenitia's 2 Overdrive finishers are Exsanguinate and Phlebotomy. Exsanguinate is a mid to long range overdrive finisher that has variable power and low priority. However, it does have stun immunity, and its power is equal to your draw plus 4, meaning that it can deal up to 9 damage if you decide to draw 5. Aside from this, as an end of beat effect, you regain some life. This is a very powerful overdrive finisher if you want to do one thing: kill a man. That's what you want to do? You want to kill a man? Use this. It has decent hit confirm, it has stun immunity, and it can deal up to 9 damage. It's quite powerful and really effective, especially if you decide to draw a lot, because it will effectively make it deal half your opponent's life bar, which is really good if you want to kill them right now. However, if that's not your thing, Phlebotomy might be more of your thing. Phlebotomy's range X, power 5, priority 5. It has soak too, and its range is equal to your draw. However, as an end of beat effect, you also regain life, and on hit, you regain more life. This overdrive finisher is what I call a comeback finisher. If you hit this, not only do you deal 5 damage to your opponent, you also regain effectively 6 life. That's pretty powerful and pretty effective to boot. If you're in a dire situation, Phlebotomy can win you the game. Just make sure you have enough life to ante in order to have range in this thing, because if you draw 0, you hit nothing. Now when it comes to using the force gauge, overloads, the special action card, and of course, Pulse, Xenitia is very bitter about it. Overloads are actually really good for her, giving her bonus stun guard, soak, and power and priority to synergize with her brawler playstyle. However, all of her tricks rely on knowing specific numbers on her opponent's attack pairs. You know what that means? If your opponent decides to ante more than 5, you can't guess it anymore. If your opponent has 4 power and they ante stuff to make them 6 power, no matter how much you try, you won't be able to get guilty off because of the fact that your opponent now has more power than the amount of draw you can have, if you get what I mean. Because you can't guess 6 because your maximum limit is 5. This applies to stuff like stun guard and priority as well, making it really hard to make any of Xenitia's things hit properly. This is why you should really ignore most of these awkward effects. They're there sometimes and they sometimes work, but most of the time you just want to regain life and trade with opponents. However, do use the overloads to gain bonus stun guard, power, and priority on your own attacks. They're quite powerful and can devastate your opponents. Now, when it comes to using Switch, Xenitia has a very awkward relationship with this as well. None of her styles really pair well with Dash, so she really likes pairing Force with Dash. That's pretty much it. You want to have access to a lot of your styles in hand because they oftentimes force your opponent to play in specific ways. Again, although their effects are clunky and not very accurate, they still threaten your opponent, and having more of them in your hand is quite powerful. Finally, when using Pulse, Xenitia kinda does okay with it. She ends up using a lot of her force to deal with a lot of damage or a lot of incoming priority, so it's not really that often that she gets to pulse. However, if she does end up pulsing, it can be very good to close the gap or create distance from opponents depending on who she's fighting. Again, she's a brawler, so play to your opponent's weaknesses. Now let's move on to the part that everybody loves: Xenitia Advanced Strategies and Combos. Xenitia Advanced Strategies come in 3 simple points. Number 1, play without the unique ability. I literally mean this. Xenitia's unique ability is really good for the heal, and you only get that when you draw 0. Most of the time, you want to draw 0. Drawing with your styles is not as powerful as you think, and therefore, the usual best way to go is to just use your unique ability as a heal engine. That's it. That's pretty much it. So don't get fooled into thinking that she's a prediction character. Don't get fooled into thinking she's a big, risky character like Hepzibah is. She's none of that. Even if she seems that way, she's none of that. You trade safely and heal while doing so. That's the strength of Xenitia. Number 2, trade. Trade all the time. Literally everything in Xenitia's kit is about trading. She has a bunch of stats, power, and stun guard included. This makes it so that when she hits someone, she hits hard. And her unique ability synergizes with this in order to heal you very well. And finally, hard reads. Every character in the game can perform a hard read. When you see that your opponent's about to do a specific attack and you don't want to mess with it, you can easily just purposely clash them in order to play a different attack afterwards and force them to play a different attack. This is called parrying, and every character in the game can do it. However, Xenitia has a very other excellent way of parrying, which is her styles. If you know what specific attack your opponent is doing, and you know that you'll have enough draw to be able to counter it, instead of parrying, you can easily just use one of your powerful styles and pay out with that. Though Xenitia ends up trading a lot, one beat wherein she guesses her opponent right and uses one of her powerful effects is more than enough to win her the entire game, so long as she continues to trade afterwards. Keep this in mind and you'll be a very successful Xenitia. Now let's move on to some Xenitia combos. Number 1 has to be Guilty Shot. Guilty Shot is really powerful, deals 4 damage, has stun guard 4, and if you want, you can give it bonus draw in order to prevent some high power attacks from hitting you. However, the before activating effect also synergizes with Shot's extra range, giving you a near full board range attack that can hurt a lot of opponents. Plus, if you don't draw, you regain 1 life. It's quite powerful. Next up is Verging Blood Weapon. Verging Blood Weapon is very interesting because it allows you to dodge and hit opponents for a lot of damage. Plus, the Blood Weapon allows you to heal on top of that. This makes it quite powerful and can net you a lot of extra life. This is one of the attack pairs that Xenitia has that doesn't involve trading, so I think it deserves mention. And finally, we have Draining Strike. Draining Strike is another powerful attack pair that Xenitia has. It deals 4 damage and regains her 1 life and has range 1 to 3. It's really powerful, it deals a lot of damage, and who cares if the on damage effect doesn't work? You regain life passively anyway. And that pretty much does it for this episode of Battle Guides featuring Xenitia. Xenitia is a very interesting character because she fools a lot of people. Because a lot of people think, oh, I have to play with her unique ability. No. Her unique ability is a cherry on top of the powerful kit of her styles. In that way, she's much like Pendros. Now, if you guys like the character, the video, or the game, do check the description out below for the Level 99 Games store. Again, this video is sponsored by Level 99 Games, which means I get paid to make them. However, I will attest to the fact that I've been making guides even before they started paying me. So if you guys really like the game, because I love the game, you can get it in the description down below. The store is there. Now, if you guys want to talk to me or any of the other BattleCON veterans, check the description out below for our websites and community forums. We'll be happy to talk to you. If you guys have specific questions for me, email in the description and comment section down below. And of course, if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, do put them in the comment section down below because I will answer. Without much else to say, don't forget your special action, but don't forget the special action. And thank you, World of Indines. Thank you, and good night.